Marty, you promised me Jeff Bezos on this show. You promised me Jeff Bezos, and we've got Dr. Mike Dixon, and he isn't even an astronaut. He's not an astronaut.
Neither's Jeff Bezos. Neither's Jeff Bezos yet. Okay.
True that.
Amazon could collapse. You know, Joe Biden and all these guys are going to actually start taxing these guys. They're going to have to pay tax. So who knows? He'll not be on no space shuttle. He'll not be in a space shuttle, Justin. He might be lucky if he can afford.
But if he's 12 miles outside his own country for more than 6 months of the year, he wouldn't pay any tax. That's true.
Good point, well made.
Yeah.
I think he'd be all right.
All right.
We are joined by an actual proper academic visionary man whose project has left these earthly confines and is now up in the ether there somewhere. Dr. Mike Dixon, welcome. How are you?
I'm just fine, thanks. And you guys sound like you're doing all right as well.
Yeah, well, I have a Guinness and I'm doing okay.
And I've already sneakily opened my Japanese whiskey.
I told you. I'm giving you. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason you're on is you have a project where you have barley in space. What's this all about? How did this come about?
It's a bit of a bucket list issue for me. I want to put barley on the moon. And a stepping stone is the International Space Station. So just last week, they moved my bar. And it does have an incremental advance in the science of going to space and using plants for human life support. So we need to know how they'll fare in the harsh environment of the radiation, the wild temperature swings outside the space station. So these barley seeds are actually sitting on what's called the MISSE platform. And don't ask me what that acronym means.
Now, the idea, let me get the idea of this. This is to see how the effect of cosmic rays and radiation affect the barley, the constituent parts of the barley. And it's up there, it's coming back again.
Yep. So the radiation is one issue. The really dramatic swings in temperature, plus or minus 200 degrees Celsius, depending on whether you're in the sun or the shade outside the station. What I want to know is, will the seeds still germinate after that kind of extreme exposure? So we'll start to put the brackets around the environment conditions, which our life support machine, in this case, the barley seeds, and they'll be life support in more than one way, as you can imagine. So
this is part of all the tomatospheres thing that's been going for 20 years, which has been distributing seeds of tomatoes that have been in space on and off for 20 years to school children. I take it school children aren't going to get the final product of the barley.
No, unfortunately, that's reserved for me. We'll do germination trials on the package, a small part of the payload that was outside the station. I've also left some inside the station, similar to the way we've been doing tomato seeds or tomato seeds for the last 20 years, as you noted, for the tomatosphere experiment. That's once again just an incremental step in, and a very real scientific step that 10-year-olds do across Canada. And there's been over 4 million students involved in that project since 2000. So
wow, great
fun. Just a hoot dealing. You know, you tell a bunch of 10-year-olds in an auditorium that the first Canadian horticultural mission specialists on the first trip to Mars is in grade 3 today, and you can hear a pin drop. It's quite inspiring.
It is inspiring. And a lot of people say that, you know, that space exploration is extremely expensive and, you know, it's very costly, but it's the real life practicalities of this. I mean, moving food from one area to another within, you know, keeping it edible, you have to send it space, but it's real life applications and so on. How do you see your experiment having real life applications?
Well, food determines how far from Earth we can go and how long we can stay. And figuring out the technologies required to grow food in the really harsh environment of space gives us technology transfer to areas, harsh environments here on Earth. I live in Canada. Northern Canada suffers a food security issue that is quite economically painful, and coming up with technological solutions to growing food in a snowbank in Yellowknife is one of the tech transfer. You mentioned that space exploration is very expensive. Indeed, it is, but you spend the money in your economy. You don't spend the money on Mars or the moon. You spend the money in the Canadian or the UK or even the Irish economy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the single greatest achievement of mankind was setting foot on the moon, and the real world applications for that have been incalculable. Never mind the inspiration of it. The real world, in terms of logistical supplies and new management techniques, and the technology of actual engineering is just incalculable.
Just the economic engine element of that activity. And in Canada, the Canadarm, the robotic arm that we're so proud of, has generated, just the economic engine of that element of our minor contribution to human space exploration. So the next Canadarm is going to be the biological life support system.
It's fascinating, it really is. Now, the seeds are coming back to Earth. Now, they have been exposed to the heat difference, the variation in temperature and the cosmic radiation and so on and so forth. When it comes back down, are you going to be monitoring what proteins are in it, and is it nitrogen going to be affected, and how do you foresee it being different?
Initially, I'm mostly interested in their survival. Did the seeds survive that harsh environment, and can they germinate? Thereafter, we can start looking deeper into, did the radiation influence any genetic changes? And we'll see that in successive generations with space heritage. And the seeds that stay in the station, where I know that they will survive because we got 20 years of tomatosphere to teach us that that's okay. So those seeds are the ones that will multiply up with space heritage in their bones, if you will, and use that crop to produce the space whiskey.
How did you first get involved with the Scottish distilleries behind Glenlivet? How did you make the connection with them in the first place?
Well, I spent 11 years as a convener for one of the malt whiskey tasting societies here in Canada.
Oh,
and that gave me the background I needed. I hosted many Scotch tastings and still do, as a matter of fact. So that gave me the context, and then it's been, as I said, a bucket list issue for me to take plants into space, but in particular barley. Barley is my prime guinea pig, and I'm actually responsible for having barley officially listed on the human space exploration initiatives for plants. There's a candidate crop list of specific plants that are good for human life support, and barley is on that list.
Mike, I see an ulterior motive than saying that, we're going to feed the astronauts, we're going to feed the Martianauts, or whatever they're going to be called whenever they get there. Yeah, feed them. Yeah. we'll take up some copper chipping as well.
Well, the reality of human exploration in general, just in all of recorded human history and probably before, everywhere we go, we end up making alcohol. Everywhere.
We do.
Without exception, no matter how harsh or whatever, we end up making alcohol. And it's my decision that it's going to be the good stuff.
Justin, I think this is a peach of a find we've found here.
Listen,
this is a guy we've found a great guy.
I've come up with a
actually
good
agrees with
question.
us.
A good question. You know, terroir is all the rage at the minute. How does that affect the terroir?
There's an excellent question and a good one for a scientist. So I'll delve into that as deeply as I possibly can.
What we need to do is we need to get Grace O'Reilly from Waterford on to discuss what stuff like from Hook Head and what it's like from the International Space Station. Let's see how it marries up. Now, I've been thinking about this interview all day, and I was thinking about what would happen if the guys on the ISS had some whiskey. Would it be a couple of American guys go, you see the Russian dude? You see, this will be a laugh. He's ejected out. You know, oh, what's that button do?
There's some pretty strict rules of engagement on the space station.
I would have thought so, but I think whenever there's lots of whiskey involved, that maybe the rules of engagement would be chucked out the window somewhat. Now, there's talk about people going to the moon within a very short period of time, realistically,
yeah.
And I assume the plans of that related to the Barley experiment are to terraform the moon, to grow crops. Now,
Yeah.
Can you see that being a viable possibility, or how would that work?
Not terraforming. There's no place in our solar system. There isn't a moon or a planet in our solar system that at this moment, or even probably for the next 100 years, that we could consider terraforming. We'll have to have some kind of controlled environment, some sort of protected dome-like whatever. The engineering of the protection that we'll require has yet to be done. But we still have to ask some simple questions like, do we like the radiation environment on the moon or Mars? And if not, then what sort of engineering do we have to approach to mitigate those and allow us to have long-term exploration activities and build up incrementally the life support requirements?
Yeah, and in terms of the various crops, I mean, obviously you need a basic vitamin requirement, a basic sustenance requirement for every individual. And how do you see barley initially doing that before you get to the stage where you're going to make whiskey on Mars?
Well, as a matter of fact, 26 years ago, when I joined that committee, Candidate Crop Selection Committee, it was chaired by an eminent plant physiologist, Frank Salisbury, who has since passed away, but nevertheless, he was the chair of that committee, and it was my first meeting attending at Kennedy Space Center, and I proposed as the Canadian delegate barley and roses as my candidate crops. And roses were kicked out immediately because you can't afford the mass and energy cost of growing a plant that you can't eat, because food drives the equation. So then I put barley on the table, and I justified it with that comment about human exploration and how we always end up making whiskey or alcohol of some sort. And I determined that it's going to be the good stuff. Well, the chairman, Frank Salisbury, didn't even laugh, and he rejected it because of that rationale. And what I didn't appreciate was that Frank was a teetotal Mormon from Utah.
Right.
And I, many years later, I was giving a talk at a conference, and Frank and his wife were in the front row of in that audience. And I told that anecdote just like that, and looked him right in the eye, and he still didn't laugh. But his wife did. In any case, my good friend Ray Wheeler at Kennedy Space Center is now.
I was going to say, which wife laughed? but the woke crowd will be after us.
He only had one, so he's not that brave. But Ray Wheeler is now the chair of that committee, and he and I, in collusion, have officially put barley on the candidate crop list for human space exploration.
I find the whole thing endlessly fascinating because
and it's fun.
It is fun, and that's all. Life should be fun. That's the point.
But it sounds like dead serious stuff here.
Yeah,
Dr.
it is.
Mike. I mean, do you have to do they specify the box, the size, the shape, how it's done? Because the astronauts have to be able to, sort of do all the germination and stuff like that, don't they? And look after
absolutely. Actually, with this payload of barley seeds, they're just seeds up in a payload package that was prepared by a company called Alpha Space in Texas, and then they're just coming back. So then we just, we do the horticulture with the seeds when they come back, and hopefully end up with a significant enough crop that we can make a significant batch of malted barley. So but the next phase, and we're in halfway through now, an initial project designing the production system, if you will, the growth chamber, the greenhouse system that will grow barley on the moon within the next 2 and at most 3 years. So late 23, early 24, it'll be a robotic mission, and we'll put, and you'll see a picture of a barley plant growing in a window with the moon in the background. That'll be the money shot that we're looking for. So
within 3 years, you're saying we'll be growing crops on the moon?
It'll be a pretty small scale system. The main objective, the science objective, will be to figure out what kind of mass and energy. That's the currency of space travel. The money, as I said, you spend in our economy. So what's the mass and energy cost of maintaining an environment in which a plant can grow and provide food and oxygen and fresh water recycling and CO2 scrubbing, all of the factors of human life support. So we need to know what kinds of conditions can we maintain, and what is the energy cost of doing that on the moon.
It's just, I find that endlessly fascinating. But I'm going to have to
get there.
I absolutely, 100%. I'm certain sure of the human being, the guy who came out of the caveman who came out and said to himself, I wonder what's on the other side of that. Those are the people who progress humankind. Those are the people who all advances come from, and all of that's fascinating. But I have to get to the question: when this barley comes back to Earth, and you're planting it and germinating it and doing all your stuff and heading towards malt, is there a chance that in a few years' time it'll be in a cask somewhere, and could for a chance it come in liquid form?
Absolutely, that is the plan. We're discussing as we speak. We're discussing with the management of the Glenlivet distillery, who's my partner in this. We're discussing just the next phases. Once we deal with the horticulture, somebody's got to make the whiskey, and those guys are really good at it, it turns out. So that'll be their job.
They have plenty of practice in doing that,
Yeah.
Another thing that popped into my head as well, and I know this is being a bit comic, when it was in space, the Fantastic Four performed in space. I'm coming back. Are they going to have superpowers?
Well, that's what I was thinking too, Marty. I was thinking GM crops. Does it have to be ushered about like a GM crop, the way some countries don't like GM crops getting into the sort of normal ecosystem? Are there concerns about things like that with seeds that have been in space?
At the moment, no. I can't conceive of any. There may be some genetic modifications imposed by the radiation exposure, but that's yet to be determined. And those are the kinds of questions we have to ask now. That's the kind of science issue that must be addressed. And so we've got all of these. I'm going to have a job for a good long time. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed step by step, and incrementally advance. It's not going to happen overnight, but at some point we must have, that's the beauty of it, we must have what I call biological life support. We must have plant-based life support systems, because we can't afford the mass and energy cost of shipping food and water and oxygen to Mars indefinitely. That's not possible. We simply can't do that.
No.
So we will figure out how to grow, beans, peas, corn, the usual suspects in a vegetarian diet, but we're also going to grow barley.
A couple of things, just to turn that on its head. If these seeds come down and they're not viable, do you see a genetic modified crop going back up to test? I don't think so. Genetic modification here to head it back up to
no. I think if we learn that space exposure influences the genetic complement of our plants, of our seeds, then the technical solution is to protect the plants and the seeds from the radiation, the way we do astronauts. We wrap astronauts in a cocoon of a space station that has considerable amount of radiation shielding.
Yeah.
So we'll devise that. I mean, and that's the sort of question you want to ask on the surface of the moon and Mars as well. How elaborate do you have to make the container to grow the plants in? Do you need to worry about radiation, on a short-term crop that you harvest and eat immediately? The odds are pretty slim that there will be some dramatic differences, but you never know. And
you never know.
That's my job. Figure that out.
Do you think?
Go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
Do you think that you would like to go to space yourself someday? If it was, say, in 20 years' time, cost effective to send somebody like yourself into space, would you go? Because Jeff Bezos is putting his money where his mouth is, and he's going with his brother. I mean, would you like to go? I mean, I'm one of these people. I wouldn't be too comfortable going down in the submarine, and I certainly wouldn't want to go into space, even if somebody was paying for me.
I would go in a heartbeat. By the way, I'll just clarify that. I would go in a heartbeat, and I would pay through the nose to go. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think I know a lot of astronauts. I know most of the Canadian astronauts and some of the American. And one of the issues is that motion sickness is a plague among people who go to space, especially first timers. And I suffer terribly from car sickness, have since I was a kid. And so I wouldn't be a good candidate. Right. However, notwithstanding that, I suppose you could pump me full of drugs and make it go away. But it would be absolutely phenomenal to get up there, about 300 or 400 kilometers and look down on Earth, or to walk on the moon. Good heavens!
Just being the most magical thing to see, just to see with your own eyes. I mean, the pictures, you watch it on screen, and it just looks otherworldly, which it is really, but it's your home planet. But it just to actually see it with your own eyes, it just must be incredible. One of the things I'm just thinking is the next person to land on the moon going to be designed to stay there a while, because possibly they have crops, long term. So basically, the first people to live on the moon are going to be vegans. And are we going to hear them saying, "I'm a vegan" from the moon? Because normally vegans quite quick to tell you they're vegans.
Yeah. Well, they don't necessarily need to be vegan. They need to be vegetarian. But having said that, I'm just about to meet a company in Argentina, meet the senior management of this company in Argentina that use plants to make meat, basically, to make animal protein. And it, of course, is a genetic modification that achieves that. So you never know.
You never know.
Or there's always Star Trek type. We can 3D print the stuff.
3D print meat burgers.
What do they call that? The replicator or something like that. Do you think
Yes.
you think it'll get to that one day?
Sure. Yeah, it's almost there now. I'm serious. 3D printing isn't instant, but you can 3D print just about anything.
Wow.
As technology just moves so quickly, and the possibilities for it are endless. Now, you are a whiskey drinker yourself. You've already said this. Give us an indication of your.
I'll send you the picture to prove it.
Give us an indication of your whiskey preferences.
I'm a Speyside guy. I'm not a real fan. I'm not a real fan of the Western Islands, the Islas. The smoky, peaty, medicinal kind of stuff doesn't turn my crank. But the sherry cask aging and the Speyside whiskeys, the Macallans and the Glenlivets and Glenfiddichs and Balvenie, Knockandoo is one of my favorites.
I love a Balvenie. I think Balvenie's. I mean, for cost, for quality, Balvenie's
21-year-old, actually 21-year-old anything from the Spey River is just fine.
What about Irish? Do we have a preference for Irish?
I was not much into Irish whiskies, but of course I went to Ireland with my brother. We walked into a pub that claimed to be the oldest pub in Ireland. And it was just down the street from the other pub that claimed to be the oldest pub in Ireland. And but indeed it was an old. I had to duck. It was people were smaller back then. But I just asked the bartender, told him that I was a complete novice with Irish whiskey, and for him to propose something, and he didn't even bat an eye. He just reached around and grabbed a. Jesus! Now I'm going to forget the name of it. It's a Jameson's product, but it's no longer
Redbreast.
Hey, thank you. Yes, Redbreast, and it was a 12-year-old Redbreast. I've since gotten into 12, 15, and 21-year-old Redbreasts, and they're all excellent. And I went to my brother and I went to the whiskey museum in where would that have been?
Opposite Trinity. Opposite Trinity University.
I guess so. Yeah. In any case, we went in there and we were the only ones there, and the young lady behind the bar laid out a whole bunch of the Redbreast and other Jameson's products, and we had and this was 10 o'clock in the morning. So
as you do. You're on holiday. Everything's all free. There's no consequence. There's no repercussions for being on holiday. You know that's.
No, I know. Actually, you mentioned Trinity College. I had an ancestor who was a professor at Trinity College back in the day, back in the 1895, and was quite famous in that he figured out how plants pulled water up. And it just so happened that was the core of my academic experience as a PhD student in Edinburgh.
Right. Does scientific work run in the family, or is it just sort of coincidence, do you think?
I think it's just a coincidence. Henry Dixon was a professor at Trinity College, the professor, the head of the department there, and quite famously devised the cohesion theory of sap ascent in plants. Who knew? Right. And I ended up investigating just that and proved him right. Actually, he was doing a whole lot of stuff without modern technology, and 100 years later, I come along and prove him right with modern technology.
Brilliant. But whenever you say quite famously, it's a kind of a relative thing, famous in certain circles. It's not Kardashian famous, but it's famous.
True that.
Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure, and we'll catch up with you when the seeds come back to earth, And I really
6
look-
months.
6 months. We'll get a catch up with you maybe a bit after that, because we'll give you time to get an analysis done. And I really look forward to it. And in a few years' time, we'll get you, hopefully purchase a bottle of whiskey from space.
Well, you won't be able to afford it, Marty.
Oh no, but
and neither
Justin,
will I.
No, Justin's buying it. Justin can.
That's no problem, man.
You don't know how much he spends on whiskey. You don't know how much he spends on whiskey.
Yeah. Don't.
All right, I won't go there. I will cut that bit out. We'll cut that bit out.
No,
Thank
you're
you
all
very
right.
much. All
Mike,
the best.
thank you. Bye.
All right. Cheers, guys.